The streets of Arlington were quiet that night to quiet. Streetlights flickered overhead like dull beacons, casting long shadows across the pavement. Most of the town had gone to sleep. But for Officer Brandon Carter and his partner, Mark Sullivan, the night was just beginning. They weren't hunting criminals. They were hunting opportunity. And tonight, they thought they found it. Talia Porter was headed home. Her SUV cruised past familiar blocks, the tires humming softly as she adjusted the rearview mirror. Midnight had come and gone, and with it, the final stage of her undercover assignment. She was calm, at least on the surface. Inside her, years of instinct buzzed like static. Something didn't sit right. She hadn't seen another car for 10 minutes, yet she felt. Watched, then came the lights, blue and red, blinding in her mirrors. A siren split the silence. She pulled over with measured grace. No panic. No hesitation. Not because she was fearless, but because fear, for someone like Talia, had long ago been tamed into precision. She reached for her license and registration just as the door opened behind her. Two men stepped out of the cruiser, one tall and cocky, the other thick with arrogance. Their eyes didn't say, "Routine stop," they said, "Target locked. You know why I pulled you over." Officer Carter's flashlight swept across her face, then down her torso, slow enough to feel like a threat. "I made a full stop." "I wasn't speeding," Talia replied evenly. Carter smirked. "That's funny. We saw something different behind the SUV." Sullivan called out, "Yo, Carter, check this out." Double quotes dot in the trunk. Talia's breath stilled. She hadn't opened the trunk all night. Carter handed back her ID, but his tone had changed. Cold. Measured. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." "Why?" she asked. "Not as protest. As strategy. We've got reason to believe you're carrying controlled substances." Talia stepped out slow, controlled. In her mind, the clock started ticking. Sullivan threw open the trunk with dramatic flair. "And what do we have here?" He sneered, pulling a small unmarked pouch into the air. White powder spilled from the opening like a movie scene. Talia didn't move. She didn't speak. Because the moment was too clean. Too rehearsed. This wasn't bad luck. It was a trap. Carter cuffed her wrists. "You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." The words were delivered like a punchline. As if they'd won something, but they hadn't, because what Carter and Sullivan didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that the woman they just framed wasn't a local, or a tourist, or a clueless bystander. Talia Porter was a CIA field operative. And the moment they closed that cell door, they triggered something far beyond their understanding. Not panic, not fear, but protocol. As they drove her toward the station, laughing about the big bust they just made. Talia stared through the window expressionless. She wasn't thinking about court. She was thinking about extraction, about surveillance, about how long it would take before the walls they built around her came crumbling down on top of them. Because when you frame the wrong woman, you don't just risk your badge, you risk everything. The walls of the Arlington police station had seen their share of injustice, but this time they were about to echo with something far louder. Consequence. Talia Porter sat in the holding cell, hands resting loosely on her lap, eyes scanning every shadow. To the casual observer, she looked passive, contained. But inside her mind, a different story played out. Every second was measured. Every footstep, every voice in the hallway, every delay cataloged, analyzed. She wasn't just waiting. She was listening. Carter and Sullivan weren't subtle. They swaggered through the station like kings of their own kingdom, tossing her fake evidence bag on the front desk with theatrical flair, cracking jokes about another one off the streets, confident the paperwork would back them up. They had done this before. Too many times. And in towns like Arlington, no one ever asked questions. But tonight, someone did. Officer James Keller, fresh from the academy and still carrying the weight of idealism in his spine, watched the scene from behind his monitor. The report filed by Carter and Sullivan was too clean, too rehearsed. Keller had learned what guilty looked like and what lazy framing looked like too. And what stood out most wasn't the evidence. It was her Talia Porter, ... and no panic. No please. Just poise, the kind that doesn't come from innocence alone, but from power. Still, he hesitated. This wasn't a department where rookies stepped out of line. But something in his gut refused to sit still. Meanwhile, down the hall, Carter leaned back in a break-room chair, sipping burnt coffee like it was champagne. She didn't even flinch. He chuckled to Sullivan. "Did you see her face? Not even a blink. She thinks she's untouchable." Sullivan smirked. "Yeah, well, she won't be so calm in court. That little performance will fade real fast. They didn't know her silence wasn't weakness. ... It was strategy. ... In her cell, Talia shifted slightly on the bench. The hem of her jacket pressed against her thigh. Just enough for the pressure sensor to activate the tiny transmitter embedded in the lining, a last resort beacon only active when everything else was compromised. She didn't know how long it would take her team to respond, but they would. That was the difference between her world and theirs. Loyalty wasn't optional, it was protocol. Back at the front desk, Keller's curiosity boiled over. He pulled up her license, ran her name through the local system. Nothing. Then he ran it again nationally. The search spun and timed out. Classified. He leaned back, heart racing. That was no ordinary woman. He glanced toward the hallway leading to the cells, then toward Carter and Sullivan, still laughing, unaware that their little game had already started to unravel. An hour passed. Then, too, Talia hadn't moved. And that silence was beginning to spread like smoke. Keller found himself pacing the evidence bag. The stop sign that wasn't there. The way she looked at him, calm, certain. He approached her cell. "Miss Porter?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She opened her eyes slowly. Met his gaze. "Yes, did you really give them consent to search your vehicle?" Talia's response was a half smile. A slow tilt of the head. "What do you think?" Keller swallowed hard. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. As if she already knew the answer. As if she already knew he was the weak link in their chain of silence. That night, as the station lights buzzed and paperwork piled, Keller slipped into the back office. Pulled up past arrest records from Carter and Sullivan. A pattern emerged almost too perfect to question. Dozens of stops. Dozens of convenient charges. Dozens of silenced voices. He stared at the screen, then at the hallway, then back again. And with trembling fingers, he hit export. The message he sent was short, but it carried the weight of a department's secrets. To whom it may concern. Something is wrong here. I don't know who else to tell. Miles away, in a nondescript building lit by humming monitors and red-eye agents, the message landed exactly where it was supposed to. The reply was already prepared. 2 words, signal received. It started with a buzz, not from a phone, but from the sliding doors of the Arlington Police Department. 3 figures entered in black suits, their shoes echoing across the linoleum like warning shots. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough to shift the entire rhythm of the station. FBI agent Daniel Price led the way, tall and composed, flanked by 2 others, one carrying a black briefcase, the other scanning the room as if memorizing faces. Behind the front desk, Officer Keller froze. His breath caught in his throat. They came, He thought the message had gone into a void. But it hadn't. It hit a nerve. And now the nerve was walking straight through the front doors. Federal investigation, Price said, flashing his badge to the desk sergeant. We need full access. Now the sergeant stammered. Is there a warrant? You want to challenge federal jurisdiction? Price asked flatly. The sergeant stepped aside. From his post near the hallway, Carter watched the agents move with surgical precision. His smirk faltered for the first time. What the hell's going on? He muttered to Sullivan, but Sullivan didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew ... In the holding cell, Talia sat upright, still motionless. But the subtle shift in background noise told her everything. Heels on tile, radios silencing, whispered voices. They were here. She tilted her head slightly. The camera outside her cell blinked once. A signal. Confirmation. Her team was watching. Inside the building now ... IT was time ... In the tech room. The FBI team plugged into the station's server. Hard drives, arrest logs, traffic stop footage. Data poured in like a flood. And what they found wasn't just alarming ... IT was systemic. Same officers. Same scripts. Same outcomes, one of the agents muttered. Jesus. In the break room, Carter paced. Relax, he snapped at Sullivan. They're probably here for something else. But then the agents walked in, Officers Carter and Sullivan. Price said, his voice cutting the air like glass. You'll come with us. Sullivan's face turned white. Carter forced a laugh. What is this, a joke? No, Price said. But you're going to wish it was. They led them down the hallway past desks, past stunned officers, past Keller, who couldn't meet their eyes, and into the very same interrogation room where Carter had once smirked at scared kids and fabricated lies. Now he was the one being recorded, and the questions didn't come slow. Why does every arrest report contain identical phrasing? Why is the evidence always found in plain view? Why did Talia Porter's consent form lack a signature? They had no answers. Only stammering. Denials. Red faces and shifting eyes. Outside, Keller stood at his desk, watching everything unfold. His hands trembled. Not with fear this time, but with release. He had tipped the first domino. And now the whole damn wall was falling. An agent approached Talia's cell. You're free to go. Ma'am, he said. She stood slowly. Calm. Silent. Measured. As she walked out, past the bullpen filled with stunned silence. Her eyes briefly met Keller's. No words passed between them, but everything had already been said. The illusion had cracked, the shield of corruption that protected Carter and Sullivan. Shattered, and the truth. It was no longer whispering. It was shouting. The doors of the Arlington Police Department swung open once more, this time not for Talia, not for the agents, but for the world watching. The sun outside was blinding, as Carter and Sullivan were escorted through the station in handcuffs. Their faces, once smug, once untouchable, now hung low. Shoulders hunched. Eyes darting, the same hallway they ruled with arrogance now echoed with the sound of their shame. Inside, officers watched in stunned silence. Some turned away. Others whispered. No one stepped forward to defend them. Talia stood to the side, her arms crossed, her expression calm. There was no gloating, no smugness, just the quiet presence of someone who had let the truth speak for her. Agent Price approached her, nodding. We've got everything, he said. It's over. She didn't smile. Not quite. But her eyes softened. Make sure it stays over, he nodded. We will. News vans began arriving within the hour. Local reporters rushed to the steps of the precinct, microphones raised. The story had exploded. FBI uncovers corruption in Virginia Police Department. The headlines didn't mention Talia Porter by name. That was intentional. Her role remained in shadow just the way she wanted. It wasn't about fame. It was about justice. Inside the interrogation room, the agents laid everything out. Audio recordings from Talia's hidden device surveillance footage showing Carter holding the planted bag before the arrest, internal data revealing a pattern of false reports and racial profiling over the past 3 years. There was no escape. Carter stayed silent. Sullivan cried, "This doesn't look like a mistake," Price said, his voice low. "It looks like a system. And you built it." Back in the bullpen, Keller sat at his desk, hands shaking slightly. He had been called in earlier to testify to verify protocol, to describe what he had seen, what he had heard. It hadn't been easy. Turning on his colleagues meant breaking the code, but as he looked at the handcuffs on Carter's wrists, he knew he'd made the right choice. Talia passed by him once more, this time on her way out. She paused. "Thank you," she said again, this time louder. Keller nodded, his throat tight. "I didn't think I had the courage." "You didn't need courage," she replied. "You just needed to stop pretending not to see." And then she was gone. That night, the news looped the same footage. The agents entering, the officers leaving in cuffs, and the statement from the FBI. This investigation revealed a disturbing abuse of power rooted in racial targeting and fabricated charges. Justice has prevailed, but this is only the beginning. Behind the scenes, Talia sat quietly in a safe house apartment, sipping tea and watching the coverage. Agent Price joined her. "You know," he said, "you could have handled this quietly. You didn't have to go through it." She turned to him. "If I didn't go through it, they'd still be doing it." To someone who couldn't fight back, he nodded slowly. "What's next?" Talia looked out the window. There's always another assignment. Another name. Another silence that needs breaking. Weeks later, Carter and Sullivan stood before a judge. They pled guilty to multiple counts: planting evidence, falsifying reports, civil rights violations. Their sentences, over 20 years each. The court made an example of them. And yet, for Talia, the real victory wasn't their downfall. It was what came next. A review board was formed. Dozens of past convictions tied to Carter and Sullivan were reopened. Internal Affairs launched full investigations into the Arlington PD. Policies were rewritten. And Officer Keller? Promoted. Tasked with leading the department's new integrity division, Talia never returned to Arlington. Her work there was done, but her impact remained in every officer who thought twice before bending the rules, in every young black man or woman who walked into a courtroom and was finally seen, and in every whisper that once said, "You can't fight the system," now answered by a louder truth. Unless you're the system. This was never just about one arrest. It was about exposing the lie and reminding the world what happens when the wrong people pick the wrong target, because sometimes the woman you try to frame is the woman trained to take you down, and she won't raise her voice because she doesn't have to. The truth will do it for her.